Welcome to Sold with Webinars, a podcast that aims to uncover how the most successful experts, coaches, consultants, and e-course professionals sell their products and services with just one sales presentation or webinar. A simple sales webinar can transform the business and life of a solopreneur. And this podcast will show you how other experts just like you are generating 6 and 7 figures per year online with their webinars. So let's get started. Hey there, Joel Irway here, and thanks so much for tuning in today. I'm super pumped about having today's guest on the show, David Abrams from Demio. Now, we have yet to have a technical specialist come on to the Sold with Webinars podcast. I had met David a few weeks ago on a trip to Orlando at a marketing event. And I've been hearing about the Demio software and hearing great things about that platform to host your live webinars. And when I talked to David today, I wanted to really go into the whole purpose for why he decided to create the webinar software platform. And David is a true blue entrepreneur at heart. And just listening to his story, listening to why he created this software and the key reasons for why he decided to create Demio really took me back to why I got into this business for myself, why I started out as an entrepreneur. So you're going to love this episode. And we even talk about some really cool things about why webinars are so important and how to increase your conversion rates and how to increase that connection with your audience. So without further ado, let's get right into today's show. David, what's up, man? Glad to have you.
Hey, thanks so much for having me, Joel. I really appreciate it. Love chatting with you. Got a lot of stuff that we can share today on the call. I'm excited, man.
Yeah. So David and I had a call yesterday with his audience for the Demio audience, and it was great. We spent about an hour jumping into all things webinars, and I'm like, dude, I need to have you on our podcast. We have yet to talk about webinar software. You've got this stuff nailed down. And before we get into that part of the content where we're going to be talking about, give my audience, give my listeners a quick introduction about your backstory, your history. Why are you qualified to talk about webinars and fill them in?
Sure. And the deeper I go with webinars and the more we build in the tech, the more I feel like, I'm not as great as some of the amazing webinar experts out there, but I'm always trying to learn. But that being said, my background really started in marketing and business. I had started my own company about 6 years ago as like a website designer, built up a web design agency. And we started doing pretty well, getting better contracts, doing like corporate style websites, just bigger and bigger, and really bringing in like conversion metrics. And I had kind of just learned online marketing through an internship prior that had ended up being a full-time position where I kind of became the marketing director. So started learning through that stuff, really learning about webinars. We used webinars at that company as a very big tool for growth. And at that time, this was like 5 years ago. So automated webinars weren't even out yet. We used like a little PHP script to just automate how a webinar would run. And it was like, there was no software, there was nothing around it. But we used to grow this business from $0 to 7 figures a year online. And when I left that company to build my own, they were doing about like $300,000 a month or something like that, some amazing amount. So we had built it up and it was really awesome. But I went off, did it on my own, thought it'd be really easy, kind of struggled my way through building companies. What I really learned in that first agency was about scalable methods of management and growth, so systems in your business and also marketing systems. How do you, as a one-man show in an agency, kind of handle all the stuff that happens? And although that kind of didn't end well with a partner leaving and stuff like that, I learned a lot about what it took to have those systems in place. So the next company that I created was systemizedThe with another partner, and we were actually doing marketing funnels for people. And this was maybe 3 years ago, before the hot funnel, where the funnel hacking stuff came out and everybody was a funnel person. This was like, we were one of the only agencies. There's like 10 major agencies out there and we were one of them. It was a lot harder then because people didn't understand what a funnel was. Now it's like a hot word. You say funnel, everyone wants to do that. Everyone wants a webinar funnel, whatever. But back then everyone was like, I don't know why I need these things. So we were selling those, and we were doing really well. I brought a lot of that system knowledge, but the continual one that we kept doing that one over and over was the webinar funnel. We would build that either an automated webinar funnel or a live webinar funnel. We would start adding in segmentation to it, and really just kind of making sure that the right message was given to the right people. We're building these very deep funnels with a lot of segmentation and really trying to dial in on that stuff. My partner currently, my co-founder in Demio, also had his own online business, and he had an info product and membership, and he was growing rapidly online. And we both kind of got into internally doing webinars ourselves. But the problem that we kept hitting was that marketing and segmentation automation was never easy. We either had to put like 3 or 4 systems together, or we were using software that we hated, that was buggy or like really, really laggy, or GoToWebinar would crash on us, like all that kind of stuff. So we went on this journey. We're like, listen, the two of us, we live like across the street from each other. So we're always talking business, whether our businesses together. And, I was doing a lot of client work. He had his own membership. We're like, let's come together. We have a lot of individual knowledge. I had a lot of technical and operational knowledge that I had built up over the years of just kind of running these agencies and stuff. And then he had a lot of the marketing and the visionary knowledge of kind of how we could make this together as a platform. And we kind of went on this journey. It took about 2 years to get to beta. And then from there, we did 4 months of beta, and we launched just about 5.5, 6 months ago to the public. So that's kind of how we got there. But it's a big background in just doing the marketing and doing the webinars and understanding the value that they give to businesses.
That's great, man. So you go from starting as an employee at a web design company and growing that to 7 figures per year, and realizing that webinars were the biggest key to scalable growth for them. Then you go into creating your own funnel agency, marketing agency, right? And helping people implement all sorts of different types of funnels there. And so now you're at, you've got Demio, and you've realized the power of webinars, and you're trying to simplify it. And I love this topic because every time somebody is talking to me about webinars, saying, Joel, what's the best software to use? And to be honest, until yesterday, I hadn't tested out Demio. And so we would recommend some basic ones and some common ones, which I know that you're aware of. But quite honestly, there are a couple of live webinars. The biggest one that I see is the kicker is the live webinar. It's either really, really expensive to get live webinar software, especially if you want more than 100 attendees, then it gets really pricey. And then there's some other really popular ones that have marketing features that, aren't reliable at all. So tell us a little bit about what was the story behind Demio? Like why Demio?
Well, again, I think we were really trying to, scratch our own itch, solve our own problem, create a platform that was easy to use, that reduced a lot of the technical overwhelm, that made it very simple to create the automations that we want, the segmentations, be used for marketing and sales, look beautiful, have a great attendee experience. I know that's like a lot of checks. Like we were trying to do a lot of things. And quite honestly, when we first got started, we were a little naive. We had this huge, huge vision of the product. And I mean, we had whiteboards across our office. We'd got this huge office. We're like, we're going to be a startup. We wrote down like a million things that we wanted to do. We tried to do it in like 2 months and, just failed miserably on all this stuff. And what we realized was what we really wanted was simplicity. And after a variety of just like technical hiccups and along this journey of building, it took about 2 years to build this. Along this journey, we realized that simplicity was the key thing to webinars. At the core, you just want to connect with your audience. You want a way to get your audience on. You want to share your message with them. You want to be able to answer questions. You want to share your sales message or your marketing message, present a call to action at the end. Or if you're not doing it, sometimes people are just doing live trainings and stuff like that. You just want to have a good way to connect. And we said that has to be the core focus. So we really went, let's focus on the reliability, the simplicity, the ease of use. Let's make something that the attendees love and that the presenters love to use, but that's also high quality. So that's really the route we went. Now, all the marketing and automation tools that we added in there, we took the same approach. How do we make this so simple? Because we wanted to take what could be a week-long process to set up a webinar campaign and make it literally just a few minutes. And so right now we run our webinar campaigns. It literally is just like copying a past webinar. All our automations stay the exact same. They're all like canned. We run the same webinar. It's super easy. It's just like a copy, and we have the webinar date set up, and we'll have a live webinar campaign running in minutes. So simplicity was the key core aspect there.
So it's easy to say that simplicity is the key aspect, but I want our listeners to understand what simplicity really is. So if you can, without going into techno babble, explain what you mean by simplicity and why it's so important. And more importantly, what challenges did you run into to separate yourself from the competitors?
Well, I think it's a really expansive question. And I think for any business person, the understanding of simplicity or even essentialism is so important. In the world where people fight over features and they compete either on price or on feature, like feature creep and stuff like that, it's so hard to reconnect with simplicity. And I think a really good example of a company that's dialed into simplicity is something like Apple, where the core thing that you're trying to do is done really, really well. And you're actually taking the user experience into deep consideration when you're creating every single thing. Does this add to the experience? Does this decrease from the experience? Does adding a feature, even if a competitor has this feature, actually give something more? Or is it just another step that someone has to do? So simplicity is actually very, very difficult to get to. But the idea of simplicity is that you just want to be able to do the core things very well, be able to get it done quickly. Most people don't buy software to get in there and play with 100 feature sets. I mean, there are those people who just are addicted to buying things, right? And they just want to set it up and they'll never use it. But most people just want to get a tool to get a result. They're just looking for the result. No one's buying a webinar tool to play with it. They want to have a webinar tool to just connect with their audience. They just want to set an event, have all the automations fire, and connect. So for us, it was really honing in on what is the critical piece that we're trying to solve or we're trying to help people with. It doesn't matter what business you're in, simplicity is always important. And now for us, and where we kind of failed initially when I said we had all of these ideas and designs, was that we didn't create what's called an MVP or a minimum viable product correctly enough. And you can do this with funnels or products. So an MVF, a minimum viable funnel, right? So what are the basic core things that we need to do and do very well? And how do we then test it, create it, test it, and make sure that is indeed the right approach to either the product or the funnel? So are customers converting in the funnel? Do customers like the software? Are we getting buyers? Like, do the core things work? Because after that, you can now iterate on those items based on what the feedback is, whether on your funnel or in your product. But for us, the idea of MVPs and simplicity kind of go hand in hand, because you can easily get and go down this path of building every single feature your competitor has and trying to build like literally every tiny detail and take years and years and years, or you launch with the core aspects of what you need, again, with the user experience in mind, thinking through how it's going to affect them and then putting it out there like that.
I don't want to say software is all about features, but from a consumer standpoint, it's one of the things that they get hooked on. So with that being said, knowing what webinars do to grow a business, growing it to 7 figures, and people really don't understand why a webinar funnel is better than any other funnel out there. So like, what's the key feature? What's the key core concept that you guys focus on when you launch Demio to say, like, if nothing else works, this is what we want to have happen? How about that?
I think the key there was connection.
Cool.
For us, the key was we want to connect you with your audience, because at the core essence of what a webinar is, it's about building relationships. The idea here is that you're giving content, you're connecting with your audience, you're engaging, you're interacting. It's like having a conversation like me and you. This conversation is much more personal than you just going to a sales page and reading this information, or you go to an article and reading this information, right? So you are learning a little bit about me. You're taking some time to interact with me, to learn from me, to get a personalized experience. So we're building a relationship together. At the end of the day, the truth is that whether we like it or not, people do business with companies they know, like, and trust, that they feel that they can invest into. It's not always just the product. It's about the pain point that's being solved, and that person is going to be the one to do it, or that company is going to be the one to do it, and they're in the right place for it. So the power of a webinar is that connection. It's the fact that you're on together, whether it's live or maybe a simulated event, which doesn't have the same conversion, but a live webinar, you'll have the ability to have that conversation, interact, to be personal. I often stop on my webinars, even in the content, and I'll answer questions, or I'll even just go deeper into a topic. I'll say, does that make sense? And I'll let people feedback, and I'll even do like a personalized dig in so that they understand like the concept even on their own level for their own business. Because I feel like those relationships are so important. Like, I want to make sure that they're walking away from this webinar with real knowledge. So the idea of the webinar is just connect with your audience, build relationships, build trust, build transparency. You want them to know that they're in good hands, whether you're selling a product or you're just doing a training. That's the core. So for us, it was, how do we make a low latency, high quality application that doesn't have a lot of hurdles or hoops to jump through? So you can literally create a webinar in 2 clicks, launch and be live, and have people joining really, really quickly in a beautiful room that just it makes you have a good experience, makes you want to be on and interact in the webinar.
Love it, man. So there's a couple of key things there that I want to reiterate for my audience, and it's the fact that when people jump into this online world and they start thinking about online marketing and how am I going to grow my business, and they're like, okay, they're looking at all the different types of funnels. I'm not sure if they understand this or not, but I've seen this just with all the conversations that I've had, is they miss the boat in realizing why, not necessarily why webinars are so effective, but they think that they get on the internet and they're like, automation. I can do all sorts of stuff and I can just get automatic customers. And so, yeah, you can do that, but you'll always get better conversion rates the more that you can talk to somebody one-on-one, right? Whenever I collect a phone lead, I know that I can get way more revenue per lead when it's pushed through a phone sale. But through phone sales, we all know that that's only scalable to a certain extent. So what's the next best thing? And that's where webinars come in, is because you can have that interaction, you can have that one-to-many sales process. And I want people to understand that the more intimate you get with your customers, the more you can grow. And from a scaling standpoint, that's why webinars are so impactful. And I love what you said. It's all about relationships and connections. That's why webinars work so well. And that's why you guys built Demio. So I love it, man.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, one of the things that we do here is we offer a one-on-one free demo of Demio on Demio. So I'll do 10 to 12 literally prospect one-on-one calls a day, talk to people one-on-one, learn where they are in their business and have that connection. And I truly feel that although we do webinars as well, but I just love the idea of real connection. It's so easy for people when they build an online business to try to hide behind the computer, to say automation will sell everything. And listen, sales pages, VSLs, all that are great, but you're looking at, a 1% conversion, 3% conversion. Webinars convert so high, 10, 15% conversion rate on live webinars. You see these numbers. Why? Because the event itself is so powerful. There's real built-in scarcity. There's real relationships. There's real excitement. There's real engagement. The only things that you can do, or the only other thing that you can do for those same exact effects, is a sit-down conversation, is a live event where you're standing on stage, a one-on-one conversation like this, or a webinar. And they're just so powerful. But like you said, they're scalable, they're easy to do. And of course, you can do things like get tracking and see automation and just learn from them. Because a lot of people, I think the other mistake people make, that it's they look at webinars as a one-time event. They run this event, it's over, that's it. But webinars are a living, breathing mechanism of marketing. So you do a webinar, the next day you could run traffic to another webinar, do it again, learning from the webinar the day before, putting in the objections that they got in chat. They can adapt it and grow it to get the conversions they need. We talked about this yesterday on our call. You do a lot of optimization once you kind of have a webinar campaign going. Optimization is key in a webinar, but you don't get that same effect from a sales page because you don't know what objections people are thinking. There's a one-way conversation happening on a webinar. You're having a two-way conversation. You can learn, adapt, grow, and become better with that.
100% right, man. That's why I'm a huge advocate for webinars. That's why you're a huge advocate for webinars. And that's why we promote them so heavily, because you can literally go from, depending on the type of product that you're selling, as long as you can get the traffic, as long as you can get the eyeballs, you can grow so quickly any business that you want. We're doing webinars in almost every niche imaginable, and we're about to expand into e-commerce, which I'm really, really excited about, because I think the e-commerce is going to crush it with webinars. I really, really do. And, the clients that I've got right now, how to play piano, we're selling a $700 info product on how to play piano, and it's crushing it right now. We took 2 infomercials, converted them to webinars, and absolutely we're crushing the performance of the infomercials. And these were $250,000 productions for the infomercial market. That's another story for another day that I'm probably going to do my own podcast on. But yeah, it's that's amazing.
Yeah, that's awesome to hear. I love hearing, it's funny, in Demio, we can see the webinars that are coming up, and there's a lot of really niche webinars that you would never think of, but they probably do very well in new niche markets. I think a lot of times, because webinars kind of came in from the internet marketing community, there's just so much I guess already marketplace awareness of webinars in IM, but a lot of these niche areas don't know them yet, and they're still just crushing when they first came out.
Let me ask a couple more questions. You're a big advocate for live webinars, so am I. As you do live webinars, what are some key things that you like to implement to make the best experience possible? And what have you seen make the biggest improvement for conversion rates live on a webinar?
Yeah, again, I think it's a good question. I think there's a lot of answers. I think first and foremost, it's really about the big promise. So that webinar itself, whatever you're going to promise to give and offer on that webinar, that big promise actually adds, because webinars are a numbers game, you change one number, you can change everything in there, right? So the big promise can be used on your registration page, messaging. So that's like your registration opt-in percentage. That's your headline, basically. Whether it's on your advertising, how you're enticing people advertising. So that's like cost per leads or the amount of traffic you get. It's also your show up rate. How excited are people to show up to that webinar? So your attendance rate. How excited are people to stay through the webinar? So really understanding and locking in on what your big promise is and really doing some testing on seeing what languaging and what angles are best for that audience. Because once you find the winning big promise for that webinar, you can use it. Obviously, you want to use that over and over and over, but just tweaking a couple of those numbers, like decreasing your cost per lead and being able to drive more traffic, which means more opt-ins, which means more show-up rate, which means more conversion. Even if your conversion stayed static at 10%, you just change one of those other numbers, you're making more money. So all of those little tweaks make huge differences down the road. The other thing that I've seen that's worked really well that I'm always harping about is incentives to stay on the webinar. So things that you'll give out at the end of the webinar. And I've seen people, this has been around forever, but I've seen people do entire slides, 5 minutes of just talking about what people will get at the end of the webinar. And they'll come up with these small, free products, complimentary items that help the pitch at the end, but they'll get them for free if they stay to the end of the webinar. And they'll spend like 5 minutes really breaking them down, like selling these items, making people excited for them. Again, getting people retention of the webinar. So getting people to stay till the close. So if you can keep 25% of the people that usually drop off on the webinar, your conversion rate, even if it stays static, goes up. Great win. Another thing I think is really just trying to be engaging. So I like to stop, ask questions throughout the presentation. I just don't like to just talk at people. I want to have the engagement. I want to have people excited. And sometimes it means just some, pausing for a little bit and being okay with a little bit of wait time till people can talk and put in questions and stuff like that. I love to do that because I think the engagement is such an important part of that. If people are just listening and they're not really in the browser, they're kind of half-heartedly listening, your marketing message will never really connect. So you got to try to figure out ways to bring people back into the messaging.
So a couple of really interesting things there. I don't want to say it's conflicting data, but I think it's more market specific. So especially the markets that have been very saturated with webinars, we have been noticing that when we give free gifts to stay into the end, we attract non-buyers, we attract freebie seekers. And so we've been moving away from that. One of the things that we did that worked really well was instead of saying, hey, I'm going to give you this thing for free at the end, I'm not saying that it doesn't work. It's just a lot of my clients are in heavily saturated webinar markets. So one of the things that we started doing at the end was our testimonials would be the hook to the end. So we would say like, hey, listen, if you stay until the end, I'm going to let you hear it from these certain people in their own words, how they experienced XYZ product, right? But I do have some other clients that still do those free giveaways at the end, and it does work. I love hearing different strategies and people in different markets.
Do you actually like advertise those in the emails? You're saying if you show up, we'll give you these X, Y, and Z?
No, to be honest, like with all the clients that I'm working with right now, we don't have a stay until the end, so we don't advertise that. We do have some low show up rates though, and so I'm sure that could help. But we sell testimonials as like hooks because, as you know, testimonials work very, very well. I mean, it's just very, very fascinating. I'm not against them. It's just we're in a lot of make money online markets, and that's been. You don't want freebie seekers. Let's just say
that makes a lot of sense. And I think also the testimonials is a really strategic way to do it, especially if you sell them as like customer success stories or like you're giving away tidbits of information that how they utilize the product in specific ways. That's really amazing. I love that.
Yeah. So the way that we frame it is like we say like, hey, you're going to hear it from our story. You're going to hear our personal experience, but you might not be representative of our story. And so we've got tons of customer testimonials and. We won't say it as testimonials, but we've got tons of success stories. And so we want you to hear from them. And so we'll like play videos from them and have them talk about it in their own terms. And so we'll say at the very end, if you want, we'll play those for you. And it's funny because it's not really valuable. It's nothing tangible they're receiving. It's just more people selling our product. But
right, the social proof on the end.
Yeah, that's the hook to stay into the end. So, all right, man. So We talked about a lot of amazing things. We talked about why webinars are so important to grow and build that connection, especially in the online world where people can hide behind their computers and they want this whole laptop lifestyle of automation and push button easy. And we talked about the relationship and the connection. We talked about how Demio really focuses on simplicity, and we all know that there are other platforms out there that aren't simple to use and aren't reliable. So I'm really excited to really dive in and continue to test Demio. What's one thing, before we wrap up, one thing that we can leave our audience with that they probably aren't aware of right now, or they might not be testing with webinars that you've seen from your experience, and if you can connect it to Demio, I'd be really interested to hear that.
That's a good one. I think just the idea of testing, I mean, this is not a new thing at all, but I really think just understanding what's happening in the webinar, where attention is being dropped, where focus is being lost, and kind of understanding how you can shift and change where you put engagement points or even objection overcome. So that's really looking at data and understanding like, okay, if I had a drop off here or people are leaving the browser here, I might need to shift and change my presentation because I think those points really show you exactly what's happening on your webinar. It's like if you're having a conversation with someone and you're doing a sales call, right? You're doing a sales call, and every time you on the other end, someone puts you on hold and kind of wasn't listening while you were talking, and they would come back for the end and then hear that and be like, oh, that's all right. If you don't have tracking in there and you're not actually paying attention to what's happening on that webinar, the actual data, you'll just think that the whole sales pitch is the problem, or maybe the pitch is the problem. But the key thing is that you didn't connect maybe enough in the section that you needed to build the pain points or to connect with your audience. So the things that need to be changed are different areas that you knew about. So I think that really diving in there and understanding, what your presentation is doing, what your presentation is giving, and where maybe you're falling down or what you can optimize is kind of the best way to do it. Because I've seen so many people take a great presentation and they've changed the offering, they've changed the big promise, and they shifted so many things when the reality was they didn't connect enough with the audience, or they didn't have the right pain points listed earlier, or the solutions that they gave weren't initially the right solutions for the avatar that they were attracting to the webinar. So that is kind of one of the key things that I've definitely seen, and I always recommend for people.
Love it, man. Great stuff. So David, where can my audience check you out? Where can they go learn more about Demio, and how can they connect with you?
Yeah, absolutely. Come to Demio.com. We have live chat on the website. You guys can chat with us anytime. We're really big on communication and just being available to chat with you guys at all times. You can also take a 15-minute Demio test drive with us. We'll do a demo one-on-one with you, and you can check it out. We'll experience it live. And of course, if you guys come from this interview, just reach out and say, I recommended you guys. I'll get you a 14-day free trial to get signed up and check it out.
Sweet. David, I appreciate it, man. Appreciate your expertise and your knowledge. I know that my audience is going to take away a lot from this interview. And if you're listening right now, please give David a shout out. Just connect with him on Facebook, connect with him on Demio. And David's a great guy. And there's not many software products out there where they get so intimate with their user experience, with their users and with their customers. And that speaks a lot to a software company. So give them a shout, give them a test drive. I promise you will not be disappointed. We used it yesterday on our interview together, and I was super impressed. So
awesome.
David, I appreciate you, and I thank you for hopping on today. And we'll wrap up our call. So thanks for tuning in today, and make sure you tune into the next episode of Sold with Webinars. All right. And as always, please go to soldwithwebinars.com and subscribe and just get notified of when the next podcast is coming out. Thanks, David.
Thanks so much.
We'll talk to you guys soon. Take care. Thanks so much for listening. We hope you enjoyed today's episode, and we look forward to giving you the next one. You can also follow and watch the behind-the-scenes look at how I'm personally launching a brand new 6- and 7-figure product from scratch at soldwithwebinars.com/TV. And if you'd like to come hang out with other fellow experts, join our Facebook group at soldwithwebinars.com/experts. Join us next time, and I'll see you there.